Hi, and welcome to Rave Leader Chat, week number 18 for the book of First Corinthians. Today we'll be looking at First Corinthians chapter 13. Before that, a couple quick announcements. One is this is going to be the last week of our First Corinthians Bible study for a while. We're going to take a break through Lent. The new books, Essentials of Effective Prayer, are in, and so they can be picked up this Sunday, or if you were here for your rave group and I'm here, I'd be glad to get those to you. That really means one of the things we're going to focus on in Lent is prayer in a variety of ways. This Sunday, you will hear about an opportunity to specifically pray for somebody. Throughout Lent, we are going to pray not on these passages, but on the prayers of Jesus. And so, in a variety of ways, we are going to focus this Lenten season on drawing near and strengthening our prayer, which is, again, one of our 6 marks of discipleship, to become a people of prayer and to grow in our prayer relationship with the Lord. And so, we invite you to come and join us with that, and your groups will be a part of that as well. So, again, this week, the week starting March 2nd, will be the break for a while through Lent, and then we will finish up First Corinthians right after Easter, and we'll wrap that up as we only have a couple chapters left after today. So today's is one of those passages that has been reassigned culturally. The main place that we hear 1 Corinthians 13 read is at a wedding, and it doesn't matter how every wedding couple I ask, they're like, hey, what's a passage? You can't help but suggest this one. There are several others I suggest as well. But this one, the same way that Psalm 23 has kind of become the funeral passage, 1 Corinthians 13 has really become the wedding passage. And that's because it speaks about the centrality, the quality, and the enduring characteristics of love. And so let us go ahead and dive into that. In some ways, flow-wise, this seems like there's a break. If you were to track Paul's been consistently discussing some of those challenges of the imbalance in communion, and last week and the last 2 weeks, the perception of gifts and that people don't belong to the body. In 14, he's going to speak about a misunderstanding or the over-application or importance of a specific gift, the gift of speaking in tongues. And right here in the middle, between 12 and 13, Paul gives us this interlude about love. And so, on one hand, we're prone to read this and go, why is this an interruption? And yet, if we really think about it, he's sort of taking a pause to say, here's the piece that's missing in all this. If you look at all these causes of division, if you look at the way that one group wants to celebrate communion their way and early and leave other people out, why the weak the strong who understand the gospel better maybe lord it over the weak, maybe why one part of the body thinks it's better than another part of the body. The thing that is missing is love. And Paul tipped us off to that way back in chapter 8. He reminded us that knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. And so this is kind of a segue, if you will, or an interlude for Paul to say, here's what's really missing. And so he tips us off in that in chapter 12 as that wraps up. As he talked about giftedness at the beginning of chapter 12, spiritual giftedness, proper perspective on the other parts of the body through the rest of chapter 12. Then he says, but desire the higher gifts, and I will show you a more excellent way. He's saying, hey, there's a better way to do this. There's a gift that supersedes all gifts, or a heart that supersedes all gifts. And so that's the introduction. As he sort of talked about gifts, he says there's gifts and higher gifts, but then there's the most excellent or the more excellent way, and he calls us toward that. So in verse 13, chapter 13, verses 1 through 3, we really hear about the centrality of love. And what we're going to see is, as Paul talks about specific gifts, what happens to them if they are not teamed up and partnered with a proper approach in love. So if I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, now that's a fantastic thing to be able to speak in great tongues. Remember, speech was a thing that was really prized there. Eloquence and arguments were great in Corinth. But even more so, if I could speak in the tongues of angels, if I could have angelic messages to say, but I have not love, look what it's reduced to. Your translation might read, I'm a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. That gong's actually too kind. It was a large piece of metal that could only reverberate other sound, and so in some ways, it just is noise. And a clanging cymbal, a cymbal that's either too strong or off key or at the wrong time. What you really hear is this thing that should be pleasing and blessing and cause our hearts and our minds to say yes. Fantastic, trained, eloquent tongues of men and angelic voices only get reduced to dissonant sound and the worst of percussion if we do not have love. And so Paul speaks past then tongues, which he was going to talk about more in chapter 4, to verse 2. If I have prophetic powers, and notice what he says, and there's been this big thing about understanding and knowledge throughout this book, and that was prized back in Corinth. And notice how much it is. If I understand all mysteries, if I have all knowledge, if I have all faith, notice that comprehensive, you don't have just most of it, you have all of it, even if you had all of it, which is hard to fathom. And so much faith that to remove mountains, and that was really a metaphor for sort of maintaining faith through the greatest struggles of life. That those mountains that were in your way got moved because you continued to hang in there faithfully and God was faithful through it. If you have all these things but you not have love, you are nothing. Or maybe you're nothing at all. So if you could understand if you have prophetic powers, understand all mysteries, all knowledge, all faith, but without love, you're nothing at all. And so if I give all that I have away and I deliver my body up to being burned, if I am generous, even to a sacrificial sense, or even if I self-sacrifice it and give myself over to martyrdom, but I don't have love with it, I gain nothing, or it all counts for nothing. These things that are biblical, and again, all these gifts are good gifts to be used, but without love, they are reduced to something far less. So we really hear that the fruitfulness of all other gifts pale without love, and it reminds us of the centrality of love. So we move to verse 4. I want to recommend questions 10 and 14 in this next section, 4 through 7. Especially that translation that he includes. I think it's a great way. We are so familiar with this passage that I think the translation that I include in the study guide is very helpful. Love waits patiently. Love shows kindness. Love does not burn with envy, does not brag, it is not inflated with its own importance. There's an activeness to this. It's not just love is patient. Love is actively waiting patiently. Love is actively showing kindness. Love does not burn with envy or boast, and it is not self-inflated. I really recommend question 14 to you about what is the common connect, or question 11, what's the common thread through all these things? And maybe we get to the heart of that in verse 5. It's not arrogant or rude, but it does not insist on its own way. The literal translation is does not seek its own. Really, that's the crux of the problem that Paul has been trying to address in the church in Corinth. They are so self-centered and self-seeking, and they break into factions and tribes who want it their way. And yet, throughout this, the common thread is that love is others-focused. And so it continues in verse 6. It's not irritable or resentful. Doesn't have an itchy trigger finger. Maybe one that we need to work on even more is it does not rejoice in wrongdoing, or maybe a more current or a playful translation to pull that out. It does not relish at the opportunity to say, I told you so. So often that's become our default. Oh, we're going to respect your Christian freedom or the freedoms that God has given you to do whatever, but wait, I can't wait for the moment to say, I told you so. That wasn't going to work out for you. But love rejoices with the truth, or maybe love is so committed to the truth, not in a spin way or a way we have to nuance it or only highlight a certain part. Love is committed to gospel truth And love is committed to the truth. The truth matters, and it is valuable. So we get that verse 7, love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Again, it talks about that. Really, these are all double negatives that get translated for us differently. It's really like, love doesn't quit. Love has faith. That love doesn't lose faith through the challenges. Love never abandons or exhausts hope, and love never gives up. And so it's a fantastic reminder of what love looks like. Now, we understand that this is a very high bar, and it's a great reminder of a central truth in the Christian life that on our own, we can't will ourselves to these things. We can make ourselves more available to it, but really, this is the love of Jesus Christ revealed that needs to be lived through us. And so we realize that we're driven back not only to the centrality of love and what the qualities of love in action are, but we know that on our own we cannot do this completely. We need to have the love of Christ pouring into us and flowing out of us. And so you get to verse 8, which really sort of talks about the enduring nature or quality of love. Paul again just sort of, love never ends. It's never going to be exhausted. It will always be applicable and valuable, even in the kingdom to come. And so then he goes back to comparing the time-bound nature of some of these other gifts. As for prophecies, they'll pass away. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it'll pass away. There will be a day when Christ comes that all these other things, prophecy telling us about what's to come, doesn't matter. It's already come. Tongues that are supposed to give us a glimpse of what heaven looks like and heavenly worship might be like, you're there. You don't need that anymore. Knowledge, whatever you need to know, is now revealed as you stand face to face. And so those will fall away, but love will still be valuable and needed. And so Paul, basically, question 17 and 18 in this section, I want to commend to you in verse 9. So now we know in part and we prophesy in part, but when the fullness comes, these things won't be needed because the partial will pass away. And then Paul gives us this metaphor for us to think about it. When I was a child, I spoke like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child, but when I became an adult, I gave up my childish ways. Now, there's lots of things that can mean, but I think one of the main things that this means here is that he's asking them and asking us to put away our self-centered view of life. One of the challenges of kids is that they believe that the world revolves around them. They grow into that ego. I want. It's all about me. They become manipulative, trying to force their parents and their friends to do what they want, and that's very far from what love looks like. And so Paul says, it was okay before we had a fuller understanding to act like a child, to speak like a child, even to think like a child, but it's time to give up those childish ways. I mean, he tells us now we see in a mirror dimly, we get a reflection and an approximation of what it looks like, but then when the fullness comes, when we are in heaven, when we are face to face with Christ, we'll know in full. It'll all be taken care of, even as we've been fully known. And then Paul sums up this whole section with now faith, hope, and love abide. But the greatest of these is love. May God bless your conversation and your group's discussion. May God bless your preparation as you continue to lead your people closer to Christ and deeper into well-rounded discipleship. Thank you so much for your partnership in the gospel. Take care and God bless.